Okay, so here we are at Bay Road, and we're continuing on the thing that we're doing of getting a little bit of information about the people behind the business. So I'm here with David. Most of you will know David. We're going to ask some questions of David that will give you some information that you probably don't know, some things about David. But firstly, before we do that, you we've known each other a long time, but I find out that you were actually you had relatives at Montague, which was near where we grew up and had our first garden centre, and we knew that family quite well. So we actually probably saw each other before we even knew each other.
We often joke we might be related.
Now I'm sure we are.
Everyone's related up there.
Yep. Aren't we, Andrew from Harmony? Yep. So I know a little bit about how you got involved in horticulture, but that involved Tasmania at the same time, didn't it? So
yes.
Yep. So
yeah.
Tell us, how did you get into plants and horticulture?
Yeah, well, I think I can blame Tom Loma, who quite a lot of people would have had something to do with over the years. Tom and I were at school together over here in Melbourne, and when his family went back to Tasmania, I took his part-time job at a retail nursery in Dingley, which was Din San, which in those days wasn't just a growing nursery or a trade market. It had a retail. So I started there as a kid at school, and then did a few years, and then when I left school I started an apprenticeship there in the late 70s, and then went to Gills in Brighton. So that was sort of in the about 1980, maybe 81. I did 10 years there with Lance, and that was exciting. I mean, Din San was exciting because they grew the most enormous,
huge plants,
range of plants, and that's where I think I got exposed to so many plants and got excited about it and started learning about plants. It was indoors to giant plants. He bought the Bilius nursery that had all the roadies and up in the hills. So Din San in those days was an extraordinary business, and he was great mates with Palmer, the Palmer fellow, Stan Palmer, from New Zealand.
From New Zealand,
and Stan would come over. So I landed in a pretty exciting place in those days, and I sort of got into it. And then Gills was a bit the same. Lance bought Gills. He was a landscaper out of a bank, ex-banker, and I think I knew more about plants than him. So I fell into this job as a 19-year-old, almost running a pretty good business with him. So I got that opportunity. I was exposed to all the plants at Din San and Gills, and then was buying plants and almost running this nursery in my teens. So that was exciting, and then and then I was with Lance for 10 years. We had a few business ventures, talked about going into business together. Bay Road came up in about 7 years before we bought Bay Road. It actually was on the market, and I was like 24 and probably a bit young, a bit early, and that opportunity sort of went past, and I stayed with Lance for another 6 or 7 years. Then Bay Road came up again, and that was the right time. Gillian and I were both working at Gills, and so 1991 we bought Bay Road.
And that was the site as it is now?
Yes, well, no, it was very run down at that point. That 7 years hadn't been great for the business. Had really deteriorated, so it was really needed some invigoration. But it still had a good, it was still had the bones of a good business. But it was tired looking. All we did at that point was clean it up, get rid of the crappy plants, painted it the Plants Plus colours in those days, because that coincided with Plants Plus, I think, coming into the Danks group. So we had great new corporate colours, and of course in those days we were only on one block. That was the original block, not where the cafe is now, where we're sitting. So it was a smaller footprint. But look, we smartened it up very quickly with some good looking plants and painted everything, and it took off.
It did, and it was. I remember at the time, like everyone sort of said, "Oh, you got to go and see what David's done at Bay Road," and and everyone did.
And it was really a coat of paint and good plants.
Yeah,
You know,
yep.
that's how we started, because we didn't have any money to.
Yep.
And then, you know, of course, probably 4 years later, we actually bought the property, and then we started building some of the structures and you know, but initially, you know, that injection of just simple stock and and paint and, you know, good service and all that, and it took off. So so yeah, that was you know, an exciting time. And of course, Plants Plus at that point was you know, we were all in Plants Plus at that point, you guys and many of the people we know, and it was we rode that wave and you know, got you know, and you know, I got involved with as you did with Plants Plus, and they were good times.
Yeah, they were good times.
Met a lot of people, and you know, we did a lot of good things. You know, a lot of good marketing and a lot of good initiatives.
And it really moved the industry forward, didn't it?
Bill Brett got involved, and that was a great thing, because he brought, you know, real professionalism, and Danks had the backup support to provide stuff that, you know, we all needed. And of course, you know, that generated a whole new phase in the industry, which, you know, you and Tracy now continue that service. So,
and I remember Bill Brett saying about Bay Road that he'd had a conversation with you about being famous for something, be famous for colour.
Exactly.
And all of those years ago, that was the big thing, that you were famous for colour, and you're still famous for colour. The displays at the front, the colour as you walk into the business, fantastic.
And that's always been the thing we've hung our hat on. That's exactly right. And so we sort of, you know, mid-90s bought the property, you know, built the pergolas, and, you know, had the structures. Because the structures were pretty tired. You know, we covered them with a bit of paint, but they still were pretty basic. So we ended up building that showroom at the front and the pergolas around the edge. And then things, you know, kicked along, and we built up the business, and the opportunity then came up to buy the block next door, and the whole journey of having a cafe and a car park, you know, began, and that really took the business to another level. We looked at Acorn and a lot of the other businesses that were the really good ones at that point, some in Queensland, all had the cafes, and so we got into that side of it, which was another exciting phase. The business became a lot bigger, a lot more complicated, you know, running a whole area that we weren't familiar with.
That's right,
And I think eventually it was nice to move that on, because I think we sort of started to, I mean, cafes were, you know, I think it needed the, you know, someone to concentrate on the cafe. And it's interesting that a lot of garden centres now have gone down that same path of renting out their, or selling off their cafes and concentrating on their core business, and letting someone focus.
Focus on what is their core business.
And I think as we came out of that drought period and the industry evolved, you know, I think, you know, the core business became stronger. And I think the ability to focus on that made sense.
So we spoke to Justin a little earlier, and he talked about the partnership that developed between you guys. And I did say to him, you know, it's not very often a partnership works, but the partnership between you and Justin is fantastic, and the business has gone another level again since that partnership. Now, I did ask this question of Justin, and it'd be interesting to see what your answer is. But with such a long involvement in horticulture, how is it different now to back in the 80s? What is different in horticulture retail?
Look, I think it you know, it's still, I said to Tracy before, you know, I still come in and find it exciting, looking at beautiful plants and presented well and sun shining. So I think that's remained, you know, the plants are the hero of what we do. What's changed, I guess, is we've become a bit more lot more sophisticated with our marketing and our merchandising and our presentation. And I think we talked about Plants Plus coming you know, in the 90s probably was the start of that. And then, you know, GRON has expanded that and kept that going. So I think that's changed. I mean, you know, we've now come back into a cycle where plants are more fashionable, I think. We went through a phase probably in the 90s with droughts and lifestyle changed and people were less, I think, interested in plants. But we've now got a generation, maybe thanks to the schools,
Yep.
teaching about plants and just a greater awareness of the environment and plants, that we now have, through the indoor plant boom, got a generation of people that are really, like in the 80s, interestingly, but interested in plants. So we've sort of come this full circle
Yes.
a bit, I guess, but it's different. But the edibles and indoors both, I think, have generated a new era.
Yep.
But also a cyclic thing that's come back, I suppose, to where it was. Because I remember those days at Din San, we grew the most enormous range of indoors, and they were huge.
Yep.
So then it all changed. Now it's come a full circle.
Yep, that's right.
So it's different, but in other ways it's sort of
Going back to where it was. Yeah. As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of so many things that you've done that's happened in the industry, and we're really not going to cover it in one little bit of a chat. So we might need to do this again, because of course you've been involved in state level, national level, international level. The stacks that you've done within and for the industry, and there's a whole nother story in that we'll have to get to.
And that's exciting too, because that's gets you out of your little business and into the big world, and it's very rewarding. And you meet a lot of people, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about. I was never going to work in the corporate world, but with Danks, there's the corporate world.
That's right.
And you learn and get involved in that, and that's valuable personally, but also good for your business.
Absolutely.
So that whole chapter is another, and it continues. I'm still involved, and I love it because it's very rewarding. So that is another interview.
It is. Okay, well, thanks for the chat, and it's as always, it's great to be at Bay Road, and we look forward to having everyone together again soon in Victoria, and we've sort of got some plans for early next year. So hopefully we'll be all here at Bay Road, and we'll all be able to catch up again. But thank you for your time.
No, it's good to have everyone now post-COVID. We can start to return to a bit more normality, and I think what we've all missed is that networking and catching up with people, because that's where you really do learn a lot and have a bit of fun too. We've done that over the years.
Fun. We've had a lot of fun. Okay, thanks David, and we look forward to all being at Bay Road again soon.